Season 2 is finally among us, guys.
What is being married like?
Yeah, we've been married for 1.5 years now. For me, I forget. Like, thanks, Fiona.
And I'm excited for this new adventure of Season 2. Let's go.
Yay. Hi, welcome to another episode of Girl Talk.
Yay.
I'm Beth. I'm here with my good friends Leiji, Naomi, and Sion.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here talking about some things we hope you can relate to.
Yeah.
Or we're all four of us are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
We wanted to talk about something that we have got kind of riled up discussing and kind of figuring out how we feel about it before the show. And that's the idea of expectations, pressure, performance, and I think one of the main things we've kind of been debating a little bit is, do our expectations come from ourselves or from other people? And honestly, I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start with a question. We always love to start with a question. And that's, when has been a time that you felt that you have experienced yourself performing to meet an expectation, whether that was an expectation that was put on you by someone else or actually one that you thought was by somebody else and actually was yourself?
It's a great question.
Very.
Anybody want to start?
I feel like because I'm quite sensitive on many ways, but I feel that sometimes I overthink on people's reactions on things.
Yeah.
And I end up creating scenarios on my mind. And then I create a situation that doesn't really exist. And then I put that kind of, I don't know if it's expectation is the right word, but, or pressure. But I feel, I don't know, I'm just using an example. Let's say I'm talking to Sion. And then one of the things Sion said, she said joking, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, does she really
actually
think
mean
that?
it?
Yeah.
Did she mean that? And then I will start to be a bit more careful the next time I talk with her.
Right.
Like, or I will, have that, but just probably just in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Leiji, I have the very same thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, I also definitely, there is something, it's really interesting. Friends of mine, some of them handle passive aggressiveness absolutely great. I don't know why. I'm like hyper sensitive to whatever I pick up as being passive aggressive. And I think it's something that I might have even talked about in one of our previous episodes, but just where I think I function very easily in either like the black or the white. But where it becomes gray, I get very confused, insecure. I'm not really sure what I should be doing. And so there's something of whenever there's like a mixture of emotion. So say it's like someone's laughing, but then it's kind of a dig. But then you don't know if it's a genuine dig or if it was just humor. Like I recognize within myself, I get crazy turmoil where I'm confused. I don't know how to respond. And I think there's something which I've been wrestling through personally within that, which is kind of trying to understand where that is a healthy sensitivity and where that is an unhealthy sensitivity.
Yeah.
And I haven't found the solution to that.
Yeah.
But I just recognize that I kind of flip from one extreme to the other, and either have just done things not really thinking with the assumption of, oh, no one's going to be offended. And that was kind of me in my teen years where I was much more just go for it. Everyone's fine with it. And then I think I entered into some kind of friendships and relationships where I realized that they perceived me as being very kind of direct or pushing things through or whatever. And I kind of swung to the other side. And I think, honestly, I'm kind of at a stage where I get very tangled up in my own mind and my own emotions out of insecurity, out of not knowing how people will perceive me if I'm offending, that kind of thing.
So would you say that maybe you started to cater your behavior depending on reactions that you got that weren't direct and could maybe be perceived one way or the other?
Yeah.
And so to make a safer bet for yourself, started to be more careful with how you were behaving.
Yeah. And I think it's out of this desire of I think I've said this, I'm a huge perfectionist, I think. Who knows? I maybe even have OCD tendencies in some areas, not all areas. But I think there's something for me, which is it's ultimately, often it comes down to one, there is a good motive of I want to be good and I want to have integrity and I want to treat people well. But I think there's also another side where it comes out of a place of I want to be someone who can't be accused of ever failing, or I don't want to be able to be accused of making the wrong decision or of not being perfect or not being good or not having integrity. And I think there's something which, who knows, maybe that even connects to an element of pride or something, but I recognize that it's like the reality is I am human. I am going to make mistakes. And even within that is what is fine to one person isn't fine to another person. And so you're always walking this kind of uncomfortable tightrope of trying to know how best to love people and having to walk a tricky journey of discovering that person by person sometimes. And so I think there's something within me, which is I kind of just want this really clear lane of this is the right thing, or this is the right thing. And so I've swung between those two pendulums trying to find the right path. And actually life is far more messy and far more convoluted than I would like it to be.
And a question on that, I'm trying to work out how to word it. Because I definitely would never say that you're somebody who wants to please people. I wouldn't call you a people pleaser. You're normally quite controversial in the way you do things, knowing you. But when you're saying that sometimes some people would think something's okay and some people would think something's not okay. When you're making a decision to behave in a certain way or to do something, how do you make that decision on what's right? Is it based on what you assume is most people's reactions to it? Or is it coming from a place inside of you where you're like, no, this is right and this is wrong?
Again, I think super complicated. Because I think the reality is there is an element of I care what people think because I care about not hurting people. And I want to be good to people. But then the reality is you can't even necessarily assume that just because the majority like something one way and the other minority don't, that the majority is right. True. Because we see that even across different environments, different kind of subcultures within things. You could be in a really unhealthy friendship group where everyone thinks one way of doing things like gossip is great and totally fine, but it actually doesn't mean that that's fine. But if you were to be that person in that environment to say, hey, actually, I don't think we should be gossiping, you could be viewed as the person who's in the wrong. You make people uncomfortable. You're not just easygoing. You're challenging them, And so I think for me, that's where it's really hard because the reality is outside of the slow growth process of conversations with people, learning more about yourself, being more self-aware, being more aware of the way that other people receive things or maybe feel about things. And then also even conversations with God and welcoming the Holy Spirit into the space to reveal things in your own heart or reveal things even in their hearts, is there isn't normally just this clean cut like, oh, okay, I go by this person's preference or I go by this person's preference. And so I think that's something where it's like, I would love that. And so honestly, it's funny because maybe I do come off as controversial because I feel the freedom to speak things often. And very much that was a family culture that I was raised in. But the reality is I have such a deep desire for peace and kind of like agreement that I think people don't always see, that I think that's one of those areas that even feeds into sometimes my anxiety, right? Is I may seem very confident on the outset, even right now.
Yes.
But internally, it's like a crazy worrying, pulling tensions, not necessarily feeling confidence.
So you're saying that you're, for example, right now you're acting really confident, but on the inside you might not be feeling super confident.
Oh yeah, I'm on the brink of crying.
But that's interesting to ask you about that. Does that wanting to come across confident come from an expectation that is on you? Come from not wanting to seem a certain way? Where does that come from?
Yes and no. I keep on saying yes and no. Yes, because I think the reality is I've had a journey of when I was younger, my mum was a feeler. if you're thinking of, there's this thing called Myers-Briggs. It has kind of a personality breakdown. You have extrovert, introvert, intuitive, sensing, feeler, thinking, judging, perceiving. And there are 16 different personalities. My dad is a very high thinker, very logical, very practical. My mom is a very high feeler, very emotional, very led by her gut, things like that. And I think even within that is there's a difference between the thinking and the feeling. And thinking is you value what is true and what is right. Obviously you don't always know what is true and what is right, but that's the thinking. And then the feeling is you value harmony and unity. So I think from when I was younger, my mum's feeling and emotional side did bring a lot more variation of her mood. And for some reason, one reason or another, I think when I was kind of 13, 14, 15, I kind of made this covenant that I didn't realize I was making, where I was like, I am not going to be emotional like my mom.
So that comes out in confidence.
Yeah. So I think there's something, and I don't know, because I think the reality is I'm not my mom. I am my own person. My dad is still my dad. My mom is still my mom. I'm a mixture of the two. I also have things of my own. But I think I recognized that there was something that I did have, which was I want to be steady and I want to be dependable. Not that my mom wasn't dependable. She really was. She was an amazing mother. But just in some of those kind of like peace elements of someone who's just always feeling the same, I'm like, that's very nice.
So you want to come across as being consistent and dependable, but that might not always be how you're feeling.
Yeah. And I think probably part of that is the growth that the journey that I've been going on of when I went to counseling. One of the biggest things then that I was addressing was that issue of me being 13, 14, saying, I don't want to be emotional like my mom. And the reality is I very much have functioned far more like a thinker. But the weird thing is even my counselor said to me, she was like, an interesting thing is the way you communicate, the way you think, I think you are a thinker. She said, but a lot of people you find they're high on the thinking, they have very low on the feeling, She's like, but the interesting mix with you is you're very high on the thinking. And she's like, you're also very high on the feeling.
Yeah.
So it's this uncomfortable mixture for me, which is not I'm trying to be confident so that people don't see my vulnerability or my confusion or, my uncertainty. It's just the reality of I have that weird mixture going on. Because this very much is how I would naturally communicate.
Yeah. But I'll ask you one more question.
Yeah. And then move around.
Just because I'm interested. So we were saying about this being confident and seeming confident and wanting to be dependable.
Yeah.
How do you think others would feel if you didn't come across that way?
I think that's been the thing that I've grown in. I think people don't necessarily always see me as confident and dependable.
But you want to be seen that way?
No, I think I want to be seen as I am.
Yeah.
And I think even within my marriage, that was a huge process of, I think, a previous relationship that I was in. I felt the need because of their lack of stability in some areas to be really, really stable and to hold everything together. And so I think I didn't even recognize fully what was going on within myself in that relationship. And it wasn't until I started a relationship with Connor, who is very consistent, far more than I am, very measured, I think far more than I am, even emotionally and things like that, but also in touch with a lot of that I think that opened up a safe space for me to suddenly be totally raw and totally vulnerable and totally honest with myself.
That's a gift.
And so I did go through it like an identity. It's funny. It's like I started a relationship with this great guy and I get an identity crisis because I suddenly had the freedom. And honestly, like within our dynamic, I am far more of a mess than Connor would be, I think, in our marriage. Like I am far more impacted. I'm far more sensitive. I'm far more vocal about the uncertainty that I have of who I am or what I should be doing. I'm far more shaken. And I think there was something of his stability that then meant that I was able to be that. And so to me, it is this really painful, but really beautiful journey that I feel like the Lord has also been leading me on. Of that has opened up a new level of me then also in all areas of my life, being able to be far more honest and far more self-aware of my weakness and of my frailty.
So good. I'm going to switch gears onto a different topic, keeping within the same theme, obviously. And Sion, we haven't heard from you yet.
No,
sorry, lady. She has so much good stuff to say.
Learning.
I'm going to ask you a question because we were talking about this a bit earlier before the show. We do that. And we're all Christians, we're all in faith. What are some of the pressures that you think that we may have as Christians to perform or to have? Do you have any personal experiences in your faith to live up to others' expectations, whether that be theirs or your own?
Yeah. I think I'm very much a person that thinks outside the box. And so I think even like in worship setting, when we like worship together, I tend to stand in the back because I want to kind of observe to see who I can go encourage, or if, God has a word for somebody, or sometimes I think from my anxiety, like I just need space. And so sometimes I feel like, I should be up front. Like I'm not worshiping how they are, like, or and stuff like that. But I think that comes from like insecurity with me. Like, nobody might have said anything, but I was just like, because there's people out there, like, I'm like, I should be up there. But then I take a minute and be like, no, God knows my heart, at the end of the day, he's the one that knows my heart. And so I think there are aspects of like, in my walk of faith, that pressure of like, I don't know, like having to be like perfect and like this, or like feeling like I need to like measure up, like where is my faith level, and I have found myself comparing myself, especially in the work that we do, with like faith, like just like, oh my gosh, like they're so passionate, on fire for God. But just because that looks one way, it doesn't mean I'm not. Do you know what I mean? Because maybe my passion for God looks different, and I think so often I find myself comparing like, oh wow, look at them. They're like, they have words for people. They're this. And then, God is always like, he's a loving God, gentle. He's like, Sion, just stop. Like, like don't compare yourself, And so I think for myself, I have to look back. I'm like, listen, everybody's way of worshiping or everybody's journey with God looks different, So I think for myself, it's just telling myself like, don't compare, because everybody's journey is different,
And can I just say something on that, Sion? Something that I love seeing you doing as well within that space is there is this thing of you're in, I mean, I'm also in the back often with you, but I noticed that you have a real gift of seeing what's happening in a room and your heart being drawn to the people in the room. And it's like, I love it. I'll be there in worship and Sion, I just see her walking off partway through, like just like instantly like headed towards this one person and then going. And oftentimes I know that it's sometimes it's that you have a word, because I think we've talked about it. Sometimes it's literally just that you're like, I feel to go and offer prayer and just to ask them if there's something to pray. Sometimes it's just to go over and ask them how they're doing. But I think it's such a beautiful pastoral heart that you have. And there is this like this real benefit of you being someone who in that space is having eyes for the group.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that comes from like my love for people. And I think also that comes from my own story. And I think also for myself is it's such a hard thing, because I also like when we have worship songs up there and I'm always just looking at the words, like I'm like, and I have a very expressive face. So sometimes I'm angry. But I think sometimes like, what do these words mean to me? Like I'm not one to just to sing or be up with the, hype of things or whatever. But I just like, what does this actually mean to me? And so sometimes like, I'm like, I don't know if I can confidently sing this, because I don't actually know if I truly mean this, or truly like, I don't even know if I really understand it. So sometimes it could look like, and then again, putting pressure on myself and, assuming people are looking at me like, oh, Sion just, just doesn't want to be in the room, doesn't want to sing, has an attitude. But nobody ever said that, but that's my own putting that assumption. And that's why you just don't ever assume until like, somebody comes and talk to you. So yeah, those kind of things.
And this might be an odd question. It's okay. But when you're saying as well, like maybe you'll look around the room and you're maybe sometimes come to compare yourself to those up the front jumping around, or maybe within different settings within the church, the ones who are always maybe more on show or more things, those are the people you're comparing yourself. Do you think what is the reason that you maybe don't compare yourself to the quieter ones or to the ones who are maybe serving behind the scenes, or the ones that you see doing things in a quiet way, or the other ones at the back in worship? Or is there a reason you think that you compare yourself to the more upfront ones than the quieter ones?
I think, good question. I think that comes from my, like, in my family. Like, so often, like, those that know me is like, wow, Sian, you're so loud. But then if you're actually put me with my family, I'm the quieter one. And I think that comes out of, like, growing up in such a, like, especially when I was younger, like, people, again, this kind of comes where Naomi said, I come off like this confident, like, you know, but actually, like, to who I am today, I had to work so hard to become who I am today. I didn't always have confidence. I had like self-hatred, like all these things. And I think, like, in my family growing up, I had so many insecurities, like seeing my sister, who's like, I was behind her all the time, you know, and she had this confidence. She just goes and do things and stuff like that. And I was just comparing myself with her. And because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you know, she has so much confidence and she'll just go do things. She takes risks. People notice her, all this kind of things. And I think comes from that. Like, I think the loud people I always assume, get the attention and all this. And I compare myself. I'm like, I think I compare because I feel like, you know, if you're quiet, you just don't have much to bring. You know, your insecurity comes out of insecurity. That's why, you know, but if you're out there loud, you know, your confidence and stuff like that. And that's a broken way of thinking, you know, and that's not true. You know, sometimes the quiet ones are the most confident ones, you know? And so I think that's what it comes from. And I think I not anymore. I had compared myself to the bigger ones because I was like, oh, they're the ones that get, you know, the spotlight. They're the ones, you know, that will go far, or like people notice them. And I think that's where it comes from for me.
Can I just add on to that? It was a big thing that I worked through in counseling, because for me, I had also had this, my personality really changed, I think, in me discovering more about myself, whereas like before I really wanted to be extroverted, you know, and there were different things that I wanted to be that I've now realized I'm not an extrovert. But something that I learned in that was just this whole picture, even within the scripture, where it talks about the body of Christ. And it's like the body like does a disservice to itself if the mouth, which was designed to be a mouth, tries to be an eye. You know, and if all the body is trying to be just the mouth, then the body's going to be useless, you know, because we can't all be mouths. We're never going to get anywhere. We're never going to have the eyes to see things, the ears to hear things, you know, the hands to do things. And I think that was something that I felt really challenged me, because I also sometimes felt this probably judgment over myself of not being something that I viewed as an effective Christian or an effective woman or whatever. But realizing this thing of, oh, God didn't create me to be the ears or whatever it is. And so again, that helped me have more of an understanding of celebrating those that were called to be that, you know, because in the same way as we're talking about this, if you are the person who's loud and expressive at the front and you love being in that space and you don't necessarily think always about the songs, you just love singing them, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. You know, it doesn't mean that it's just the quiet people who are serving, who are in the right space and the right mindset, you know, and the right heart posture. Because the reality is, like, God totally could have created you to be the mouth, you know, and someone else like Sian maybe is created to be the eyes and someone else is created to be the hand.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of this goes back to, like, again, portraying like confidence when inside you're like dying, like kind of you're saying. I think we're all dying like inside, you know. I think so often I'm like, where I've like, you know, people would say things to me where I was like, ooh, that hurt, because how I've portrayed myself is like, I can take anything, like whatever, right? But inside, or maybe I'll go home and cry about it. But, you know, and I was like, okay, so when you're doing this to yourself, right? And this comes out of insecurity because, you know, I have, you know, there's pride that got in the way, or like, I have to be strong. I have to be, you know, this. And so I had always like portrayed like, you know, I mean, I do believe that I am a strong woman, but there are times where I feel weak, but I, you know, would portray I'm stronger than I actually feel. And so I think I sometimes when I'm feeling like, oh, people are feeling this, you know, but I do this myself, you know, I assume that people think a certain way because, well, what are you doing? You're portraying like, you know, you're strong, but when you're actually like dying inside, you know. Anyways.
Wow. I'm just gonna keep
going.
Keep cutting, lady. Hello. to go to a broader what's the word, atmosphere or situation. Leiji, you've got a business mind, right? Like you managed our cafe for a long time, and you're a businesswoman at heart. I think that's right to say.
Yeah.
You're also now a mother.
Yeah.
And so in my head, those are two very, very easy ones to have pressure in.
Yeah.
Two very easy situations. But you seem to be the most chill person that I know. You're very calm. You're very collective on the outside anyway. And my question for you is, where in those, you don't have to answer it for those settings exactly. I'm just curious now, or maybe soon to be combining both again, business and motherhood. Where are pressures and and how do you cope with that?
Yeah. Very good questions. I feel like as a business, I feel like I have I don't know if it's right to say that, but like a thicker skin when it comes to that. Like that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
I'll do what I can. I'll give my best.
That's good.
And I have no problems to have criticism. I deal really well with criticism when it comes on the work environment. You know, I love when people come straight to my face and say, I don't agree, or I don't like this, or something.
Damn.
That's amazing,
so good.
lady.
That's amazing.
No, but that's why, that's exactly what I said. That is on a work
Only
environment.
when it comes to
When it comes to work, I have a business mind, and I'll do what I can to fix that, and I'll go through anything
Right.
that like to get a better perspective or a better result.
Yeah.
That's how that's how it usually goes. But then when it comes to motherhood or on being just myself, it's completely different. It's really it really is different.
Why do you think it's different?
Yeah.
I feel that it's just, I think when it comes to being myself, it's a bit harder to separate when criticism come, or I feel very, I don't know. I'm still figuring out some of those things. I find it, as I was saying, sometimes it's hard when I'm talking to people and I need to figure it out what they mean, when they are saying something.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when I start to get to know people, I actually say up front, like, if you don't understand what I'm saying, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, if it doesn't make sense, just say straight to my face.
Yeah.
Right.
I do so much better when people are straight up front.
Yeah.
I don't want to be thinking later, did that person got it right? Like, did I hurt someone's feelings?
Yeah.
The idea that I would hurt someone's feelings kills me.
Yeah.
It's like one of my biggest fears,
Yeah.
because I don't, that's the last thing I want to do, you know? When it comes to a work environment, if we're talking about business, I'm not going to go personal with you, but I'm going to be straight and like set expectations. I feel more capable of going through those things. But when it comes to me, like my personal life, friendship, relationship, family, I try to, now I do that because I know that helps me.
Right.
But when I was younger, it was really an insecurity. It was hard for me to build friendship with people
Yeah.
because exactly that reason. Like, it was hard for me to know, what do you mean when? Because I think when we are good friends, like we are close, I can be sassy with you.
Yeah.
You know, I can make jokes and
Yeah.
stuff, but I can be quite close up. I'm not that out there when I start to get to know people, exactly for that reason, because I don't want for people to get me wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that with your, like, when it comes to work, you want to take, like, hey, give me feedback and like criticism,
Yeah.
whatever. I think that's amazing quality, because I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like I'd be like, what do you mean I'm not doing
Please
good?
don't tell me.
Yeah, don't tell me. I think that's amazing quality.
I guess maybe I could ask the question. It's an assumption more than a question. It's maybe harder to take criticism for yourself instead of your business, because the business is saying, oh, there's something wrong with your business. But if someone criticizes you, it's there's something wrong with you.
With you. Yeah.
And so how do you feel when you receive, you're saying that you feel it a lot deeper when you're experiencing criticism that's about yourself. How do you feel when somebody gives you criticism about yourself?
I feel a mix of things, but a little bit of failure. I think it's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Because I am a very family oriented. I am like very loyal on my friendship. I will take care of you with everything I have if you're my friend. So if I get emotional, oh my God, I'll be the one crying at this one. But it's really hard for me if I hurt you in some way.
Yeah.
You know, it's the last thing I want, because when I love someone, the last thing I want is to know that I did the completely opposite.
Yeah.
And it's so tricky, because when you love someone, you're going to hurt that person.
It's true.
You wanting it or not, because we are all humans. It's part of who we are.
Yeah.
That can happen at some point. And I think because I try so hard, when it comes to that point, I feel like I fail.
How do you overcome it?
Yeah.
If you figured it out. If you haven't, that's okay.
I don't think I did 100%, but I think I'm doing better now.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying about letting people know up front really helps me.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to try so hard to like, oh my gosh, what do you mean?
Right.
You know, trying to read in between the lines or body language and everything, which I feel that in some ways, that's why I feel sometimes so strong from the Holy Spirit in some ways or like situations. I feel that it's quite easy for me to discern what is going on.
Yeah.
But I feel that it's like through years of relationship with God and being aware of the Holy Spirit. But at the same time, because I'm human, it can also be hard and just get too much into my mind.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So things I try to do is really ask God, like, is it really true? Is it real? Or is just my mind tricking me? Is it just my insecurities talking out loud? You know?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think those are things that are helping me through.
Yeah.
That's so good, Leiji.
Can I just say from that as well, Leiji, I think what you said of where it's easier when someone just brings something, it is just a bit more honest with you. You know, like if you did something that upsets them and they bring it to you, and then you know, and you can deal with it.
Because I can deal with what is
can
real.
Exactly. And you're not, and even what Sion, you were saying of like, sometimes it's stuff that we assume we've done.
Exactly.
And it then like impacts the richness of our relationships because we
absolutely.
withhold or we're not fully ourselves because we think that we might offend them by being that. And I actually just wanted to like bring up a really brief thing of like, Sion, I remember you have improved so much in that, like in terms of being able to bring things when there's a misunderstanding and you're like, hey, in this conversation, you said this. I felt like maybe it was that you were criticizing me for this or whatever it was. Can we clarify?
Yeah.
And I remember I was so grateful, even recently, it was probably like a month ago when you brought something up to me. And in the moment, I was like, I said this thing and I was like, I know that I think that landed wrong. And what I meant as a joke actually came off with like a hurtful undertone and I didn't mean it to and I didn't actually think it, you know. And I remember I was so grateful then because I was walking around with this like feeling, you know, but I'm like, but I don't want to assume maybe it's just me, you know, and I don't want to make it a thing when it's not. But I remember then Sion was really intentional to reach out to me and say like, hey, can we talk? And I'm feeling awful like a puppy with its like legs in between the tail in between the legs. But I remember meeting with you and you just really vulnerably, really humbly, really like honestly very kindly being like, hey Naomi, in this situation you said this and it actually hurt me and I wanted to clarify what you meant by it. And I remember feeling so grateful for that and that being such a positive experience of me being able to apologize and just say I'm so sorry that totally came off that way that it did.
Thank you so much. And I like, it's not easy because so often people say you're so good at like going to have a crucial conversation. I'm like, I don't be like, oh yippee, I gotta go talk. But for me, it's like I think because I love you,
Yeah.
right? And so if you love that friend and
Yeah.
you want them to, everybody has a blind spot, right? So I think even coming to you and saying that to you, I mean, I didn't enjoy it, but you took it you received so well, because you just don't know how people are going to receive. Like for myself, that's how I would want. Like, I'm sure, like, I don't want to hurt people. I'm not there. I don't want to maliciously hurt people,
Yeah.
but there's certain things, if I keep doing it and I don't know, how would I be better? And if you
Yeah.
love that person, that's what you do, right? It's
Yeah.
all how you say it. But I'm glad that you
It's so
received
good.
it well. Thank you.
I have another question for all of you. And it's not a loaded question, it's a genuine question. Sometimes we have the loaded ones, but each one of you, a common theme when you're speaking is this thing of, I just don't want to hurt people.
Yeah.
And I relate to that as well. And my question is, how much of I don't want to hurt people is I don't want to hurt people? And how much of it is I don't want to be seen as somebody who's making a mistake
Yeah.
and hurting somebody?
Right.
Ugh, thin line.
It's a great
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Anyone have an answer?
Sorry, repeat the question.
So everything that's each one of you are saying,
Yeah.
I just don't want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
I just don't want to hurt that person.
Yeah.
How much of that is coming from a genuine, I don't want to hurt them? And how much of it is coming from, I don't want to be seen as making a mistake
Right.
and hurting that person and being somebody who hurts people? Because honestly, sometimes I think I have that in my mind. Have I actually, when I've made this mistake and I've said something that's hurt somebody, am I actually really concerned that I've hurt them? Or actually, am I actually concerned that I'm coming across as somebody who's made a mistake?
Yeah.
Because honestly, I don't always have what I would say is the right motive.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So do you guys ever think about that?
I mean, I think even in my answer earlier, it shows that it's both.
Yeah.
Because there is a genuine element of I don't want to hurt people. But I think there's also the very real element of, in many ways, I don't want to hurt people because then it does hurt me. And it either hurts me through what then people think about me, or what that person thinks about me, or it creates a severing relationship, or even what I think about myself. And I think there is an element of, I always often bring it quite broad, but there is this broad element of like that we were created for fullness of relationship, and we were created for love, and we were created for harmony and for peace and for these things. So I think there is something very real in that of like disunity and broken trust or broken relationship is not what we were created to have with one another.
Yeah.
So it hurts me that it's that I'm causing that to someone else. But in the same way, because that's now happened, it's a damaged expression of my humanity and what I was really created for.
That's good.
Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, we've discussed about performance pressure, criticism, hurting people. And I guess it's just as you put it, at the end of the day, we're created for fullness of relationship with people.
Yeah.
And to walk in ourselves and to walk in our identity. And as Sion often says as well, like, just don't compare yourself. Just don't. It's a lot easier not
You'll
to.
have a better life.
I've enjoyed getting to know some other parts of you and hearing these stories. And thank you so much for tuning in. And thanks for listening, those who are listening.
Thank you.
And see ya.
Yeah. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.